G'day, John Robertson. Robbo, as you're known across as one of Blacktown's finest citizens, former leader of the Labor Party, former head of the trade union movement in New South Wales, chairman of iCare, boss of Foodbank, and a long-term advocate for Western Sydney. John, welcome to the Dialogue's Western Sydney Unfiltered.
Thanks, Chris. I've been waiting for this for a while.
Some say you and I have never been filtered, so it's the title is redundant. But let's see how we go. Mate, in the background, not only the background is the world's greatest footy stadium, home of the mighty Parramatta Royals, not a passion we share, but Foodbank. It's been tough time. Us Zoom warriors who've had to settle at home with maybe sometimes bad internet access for streaming Netflix and working from home. You've been working at the other end of town, working those for whom the COVID pandemic meant even worse day and even less access to fresh food. Fill us in on what we don't know on this front.
It's been shocking, mate. And in fact, I think we've been struck by just how much demand there's been for food throughout this time. 2021 has been much tougher than at the height of 2020 in lockdown. And we've seen so many people who for the first time in their lives haven't been able to put food on the table. And I think that's been one of the really confronting things for me. People, I've met people who've run their own businesses who've slipped through the cracks and haven't been able to get government funding. I've met people who in 2020 tipped their life savings into setting up a business, which has subsequently collapsed. Wow. I say to people, you can't get a full appreciation of it if you're not living it or it's not in your face. And it's not to say that people can't have empathy for it, but I think the magnitude of the problem is lost on most people. And to give you an idea, so we've been shipping out the equivalent since the end of June of between 600,000 and 650,000 meals a week.
Wow.
We've just hit this, we will hit this week 100,000 emergency relief hampers on top of that food piece that I talked about, those meals. The emergency relief hampers are on top of that. Now, we've been really under the pump here, and I've been very fortunate the team that I'm leading here at Foodbank is a team that's got a can-do attitude, and we made a really conscious decision early that we would do whatever it was going to take to make sure food was going to where it was needed. We, for the first time ever, set up an afternoon shift.
For those who haven't had the pleasure of going out to the facility at Blacktown, we're saying food that also often includes shampoo and basic essentials for families in hampers, that not only feeding them but cleaning them, keeping them on track.
Well, those emergency relief hampers, that 100,000 is just food. Then we're doing personal care on top of that as well. So it's been extraordinary. As I say, we set up an afternoon shift. We've never run an afternoon shift before. We've had to manage, we've had to split our workforce in two so that if we've had a COVID positive in the warehouse, the whole place wasn't shut. We only lost half our workforce. We've had two experiences where we've lost our afternoon shift. Just the other things that go with making sure we can keep operating. We had one day where we were closed because of a COVID positive to do the deep clean piece. And one of our charities out in the Hawkesbury said just that one day, she realised that if we were closed for 14 days, how many people across the state would go hungry.
Wow. It does bring it home to the harsh reality of COVID. Now, in your role, be former state member for Blacktown, being in Foodbank and another in a trade union background, COVID didn't cause this stuff, right? It just highlighted a lot. It's suddenly the world's woken up to those who have not a little more than they were before. Have you seen a significant that there's been some escalation? Do you expect it therefore goes back to very manageable levels, or
no, I don't.
Are you banking on?
Look, we're banking on this level of demand continuing probably till the end of February, early March. I think it's like a lot of things that if you've got a job, you've had a job, we're back at 80%, you're out, life's sort of starting to feel normal. There'll be a lot of small businesses that just never come back. There'll be people whose jobs don't immediately come back or their hours aren't where they were. and the government support that is there is being wound back over time. So no, I think we're still going to see that level of demand. When you talk about normal, there's still so many people pre-COVID who were living with food insecurity.
Yeah.
And a lot of those people work. I think we're all preconditioned to prejudge why people would find themselves in a situation where they can't put food on the table. You know, they're on social security, they're homeless, those sorts of things. And that's part of the cohort. But sadly, with the growth of the gig economy, increased casualisation of the workforce, for a lot of people, mate, that's just their day-to-day reality. And it's not to say those forms of
they're literally hunting and gathering every day. I mean,
and for some people, those forms of employment work well, but there's a whole cohort of other people where it just leaves them feeling very vulnerable. And what they end up doing is food becomes a discretionary spending item. You know, you go, I've got to pay rent, got to keep the lights on, got to keep the car running so I can get to work, you know, when I get work. And once you've cut back on everything else, it suddenly becomes the reality that people go, okay, I just got to cut back on how many meals I eat a week.
Look, and as the viewers can see, I've usually had the discretion to find a meal. But for those of us for whom food insecurity is trying to get the mushrooms off your plate before you have to eat them, this is a living, breathing part and sadly a permanent part of some parts of our community. Now, before we go to other parts of your Western Sydney journey, because you're more than just Foodbank, there must be some people you have to say thank you to. There must be a way to tell people who are watching what they can do to help. I'm not going to let go without a good ad for Foodbank, because we, the Dialogue, are formalising a partnership with you guys to do what we can do, and as one of the great institutions of Western Sydney.
Yeah, look, we've been very fortunate. I mean, the state government has really stepped up to help us out in this space. We've had to buy food. We've generally relied on food being donated through, you know, food and grocery manufacturers, the major retailers, and those sorts of things. The demand's been so great, we've had to buy food, and I think the state government's been very supportive of that. We've worked with Resilience New South Wales. We work with our 750 charities, you know, who've been fantastic, who've really stepped up and helped us. You know, we call them charity partners because they're partners in our journey to get food to people who need it. We've been working with a whole bunch of local councils in those what were referred to as hotspot areas, which has largely been in Western Sydney. You know, those local councils, we've worked with them, and mate, most of all our workforce has just been phenomenal. And then the generosity of the public, you know, donating, and anyone who wants to donate can simply go to foodbank.org.au and donate. The public have been so generous. You know, we talk about the fact that, you know, a donation of $35 helps us get one of these emergency relief hampers out the door to a family that's needed. And we're going to need that support for some time to come. But people have been generous. If you're in a position to do it, you know, we obviously appreciate that sort of support from people who can afford it.
Now, for the people who don't know as much about John Robertson as I do, I've already mentioned he's a good Eels supporter, which is, you know, pretty much all you need to know about somebody in my view. But in addition, mate, you would normally be the poster boy for your standard right-wing union, Labor leader, etc. Yet you were also in a part of town where the Republic vote and single same-sex marriage votes didn't follow a normal left-right pattern. We're a very socially conservative area. You were one of the champions at a time for rights for gay couples when it wasn't as popular as it might now be in the industrial movement or in the Labor movement. That must have been tough, and you must take some pride now with the way Sydney has got itself on the right side of history.
Yeah, mate, it was, look, for me, I mean, I've got a son who's gay, and I think I've made no secret of that.
You're not outing him now. No,
he's been out for a long time. But and I remember at the time when I first became leader, and I was asked by Quentin Dempster when we used to still have a thing called State Line
back in the day.
And Quentin asked me about it, and I said to him at the time, I said, "Hey, you know, my background obviously is about equality," and I said, "But for me, it was also personal as a parent. You know, it was something really significant that my son had two sisters, and I'd like him to be, if he chose to you know, have the option of marrying someone he loves." He did tell me over the weekend he's not getting married. And I said, all that struggle. And he goes, no, Dad, it was all about the choice and the ability to do so if I chose to. What was really interesting, mate, about all that, you know, as the member for Blacktown, and I used to share this with people, I never had one person come up to me and question my stance. And I think part of it would have simply come down to the fact that for me, it was as much personal as it was political. And I think the way I conveyed it as a parent, I think regardless of what your views were, if you're a parent, I think most parents aspire for their children, you know, to have the best life they can possibly have, regardless of where you would put yourself on the political spectrum.
You stint as opposition leader. We've had a few of those. Labor's had a few opposition leaders in recent years, and one of them's just announced she's leaving the parliament as Chris Minns has stepped in. You had an unusual path though, having been your background with the unions and in Labor politics. The current Premier, who I know you're close to, Don Perrottet, and who's been a great supporter of Foodbank, I should acknowledge that as well. It's fair to say he pulled a bit of a political rabbit out of somewhere when he announced one John Robertson in the midst of the problems about iCare, the workers' comp scheme, which had some controversy and certainly administrative challenges. Suddenly, one John Robertson's the new chairman. As a political observer's noted, suddenly it was no longer a political issue. Which is both the respect you're owed in the role in fixing it, and it's a pretty smart move as well. Could the pundits watching now who with their own workers' comp, have you steadied the ship? Is that looking better?
Look, Chris, there's still a significant bit of work to do there. There's no question about it. If I just step back for a minute about why, I mean, the why piece for me was I've seen at Foodbank, we've actually been feeding people who've fallen through the cracks where the workers' comp systems fail. At Foodbank, we deal with people who are at their most vulnerable, and at iCare, you're dealing with people who are at a moment of vulnerability in their life, and so it's about a values piece for me.
Last one, Western Sydney, you're the former member for Blacktown. You're also the first political leader in Australia, when you're opposition leader, to welcome Badgerys Creek Airport. Now, it's fair to say not everybody in the political establishment, Labor political establishment of Blacktown, always shared your enthusiasm. I did say to some of them, a plane taking off of Badgerys Creek and the noise of Blacktown's like someone at Manly going, "Oh my God, a plane just took off a mascot." But with the benefit of hindsight now, should Blacktown have embraced a little earlier the fact they were left out of the city deal, closed out of the Western City Parkland, the 15 million because of that? And is there a way back? How do we make Blacktown and the airport and Western Sydney, which is happening on a Tony, but how do we bring that back together?
Yeah, look, and I think for Tony, I think Tony
Bluestyle, the man.
We've had a number of conversations about just that very point. I think one of the problems was, if I was perfectly blunt, is there were too many people who'd been fighting a war for 20 or more years, who like the Japanese guy on the island in the Pacific, the Second World War's over and he's still there thinking the war's going. Look, I signed up to this, mate, and I reached out and wrote to Tony Abbott when he was Prime Minister, supporting it, because there are very few times in life where there are big projects that can be a catalyst for change. We keep talking about Western Sydney getting left behind. We keep talking about all the jobs keep going into the city and those sorts of things. And when there's a realistic proposition of something as significant as an airport and what eventuates around it. Now, look, in reality, if I'm fortunate enough, I'll still be here when it really gets to that point where it is what we all hope it will be. But every time, as I say, I think sometimes those moments come, and if you don't grab them, they just pass you by, or they don't eventuate because no one's got the courage to actually go, this is a golden opportunity and a golden moment. So I saw that, and I saw it as an opportunity to actually say, hey, this is for Western Sydney. This is going to make a huge difference. The opportunities that it presents, we talk about jobs for the next century and those sorts of things. They are going to be around airports. It's just the nature of travel, of technology, and all those sorts of things.
Well, mate, let's hope that stadium behind you is host to Neil's premiership before the airport's built.
Yes.
The Foodbank. What's about to be the Combank Stadium is about to get a new sign as well. So they make sure kick in for you as well. John Robertson, you are one of Western Sydney's great institutions, my friend. good luck with Foodbank. The Dialogue's delighted to be partner in trying to help you drive this forward. And if people get the chance when COVID's over to take their team back out there for a day to help pack boxes, I don't hold meetings at your rooms out there in Blacktown. It's a great opportunity for Western Sydney businesses to get behind, just something practical to help. In the meantime, mate, thanks for everything you're doing for the region.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for the opportunity.
Cheers.